Metal Gear Solid 2 is one of my favorite games ever. I was 11 years old when it came out. A lot of ideas that were told throughout that story, I didn't really understand until playthroughs I had after. But the day that I got it, I just got into a car accident, and my dad, as a way to cheer me up, bought me Metal Gear Solid 2 after he saw how much I was enjoying Metal Gear Solid 1 for the last few years. W Dad, by the way, buying your son an M-rated game to cheer him up. Genuinely, though, thank you, Father. I'm going to assume that you know nothing about the game. At the time of the release, this was a massive game. It was a big deal. It was probably one of the biggest AAA games coming out at the time. Hot off the tails of a very, very successful Metal Gear Solid 1 that did very well on the first PlayStation, I was kind of the ideal player for who Kojima was targeting with the ideas that he put in this game. There's a lot of stuff in that game over the years I've found stuck to me and taught me how to think really critically about issues, especially nowadays. And I wanted to just share that in a video and see how it goes. From this point on, I'm going to sound like a crazy person, so stick with me here. This is my rabbit hole. The whole idea behind the series, Metal Gear Solid MGS, is kind of to thematically form the building blocks of a person. So MGS, memes, genes, and scenes. Memes, the ideas and beliefs that you have that then form the person you are or the actions that you do. Genes, whatever you're born with, again, same thing. Nature versus nurture, what draws you to believe certain things based on how you were born and how you can go with that or against that. The last thing is scenes or sense. I think Kojima used both of these, but the idea is that the context that you're born in, the timeline that you're born in, the culture, the society that you happen to be in, the language that you speak, all that kind of wraps up into what's seen. I'm going to focus on the first two in this video. The third one is kind of contained to the third game, and that's outside the scope of what I'm talking about here. So with Metal Gear Solid 1, we had genes, which was the idea that genes make you into who you are, and there's a belief that if you are born a certain way, you get certain benefits based on your talents and skills and stuff. In the whole game, you play as Solid Snake, the protagonist, and the antagonist, Liquid Snake. They're twins. Within that, the villain believes the whole game that they were the one given the inferior gene. And by the way, within this world, they were cloned. And he uses this as an excuse to basically say that he sucks because of this. He wasn't given opportunities because of this, and he really leans into that belief. And it kills him, it pains him. It's what he leans into to explain his shortcoming. Meanwhile, your character, who has the supposedly superior genes, is doing great. He's a super soldier, he's figuring it out, but he's never really thought about it. And the big twist at the end is that they're swapped, is that the villain, Liquid Snake, actually had the superior genes the whole time, and your character, Solid Snake, actually had the inferior genes the whole time, and somehow he was able to make through and do what he needed to do. So the idea and theming behind the whole game was just, it's not really the DNA in you that makes you who you are, but the choices that you make. Okay? Easy peasy, right? The second game, Metal Gear Solid 2, topic of this video and my favorite, is about memes. Not really quite in the way that we use the word today, but not that far off either. It's just generally the ideas and beliefs that form a person and how that drives them towards certain action. Cool? Cool. Now, when this game came out, there was a lot of hype for this game coming out. Everyone was super excited to get back into this world. And it was marketed as the perfect sequel to the original. By far, the biggest AAA game at the time. And your expectation for something like that would be like, hey, I would like to play another one of those. And you would expect a pretty standard sequel to a game. You get to play Solid Snake again. That's what you want to do as the player, right? But this is Kojima, and it's a game about ideas and beliefs. So obviously it had to not be as straightforward. The trailers were so badass at the time that people were just standing at the booth that they were showing this, staring at this trailer, watching it over and over again. Because again, it was the most impressive game that anyone has ever seen at that time in the year 2000, if not even earlier. Nobody knew in any way whatsoever that when the game got in the players' hands on release, they were about to be rug pulled and gaslit, and they were going to enjoy it. The game was basically a crazy man's ride, playing with the player's mind, disguised as a sequel to a popular video game. Why would you do that? But it did work. So before the game launched, there was a first chapter, which is the tanker chapter. That was straight up the ideal sequel to that first game. You played a Solid Snake. There was good callbacks. You were cool. You played the legend himself, Solid Snake. Immensely detailed at the time, graphically intense at the time, and returning characters and callbacks, right? This was dropped as a demo next to another game Kojima was working on, and people actually bought that game to play that demo. And they played it over and over again, which in itself is an important detail for you going into the main game. This was aimed at manipulating superfans. And so when the full game came out, same thing. You played through the insanely good first chapter, which was double the length of the demo. And then the game took a really odd turn. You were then presented with a character that you would be playing for the rest of the game. A significant, huge portion of the game, Raiden. And everything from here kind of feels weird. You're set up in a way to believe that you are Solid Snake. And throughout the rest of the game, you and this character are linked in the confusion of what is going on. But it's intrigue everywhere because none of this was marketed in the actual game. Nobody knew what the second chapter was. Nobody knew who this character was. And up to the point that you got your hands on that controller and that game and played yourself, everyone was super confused. This was a time before everyone had very easy access to the internet. So it was just straight up the most confusing, strange time in the most AAA expensive game at the time. And what begins to unfold is this weird game that plays out similarly to the first one. Not exactly the same, but it's got roughly the same beats and roughly the same characters. And it kind of has this weird, mysterious, creepy vibe going on. Like something psychologically is going wrong around you. And making a really crazy story short, you get all the way to the end and you realize that Raiden is being messed with the entire time. And in an extension, the player is also being messed with the entire time. The ideal candidate for this player is someone who's played the first game a lot, played the demo a lot. That person would have a one-to-one experience of who Raiden is. Raiden wants to be Solid Snake. Raiden did all these simulations of the first game in order to get to where they are. And in a way, he thinks this is the ultimate test to see if he is actually like Solid Snake or if he is another person entity himself. But the whole thing basically devolves to him not even being real? Question mark. Like the game near the end kind of pulls a lot of weird strings to basically show you, the player, and Raiden that you are inside a video game. And it gets really postmodern and meta from this point. The characters that you would talk to, the same kind of characters that you would hear from the first game, were AI, which is, topical for 2025. And these AI, who are pretending to be both your colonel and your girlfriend, go on to tell you that they were trying to put you through the scenarios of being Solid Snake in hopes to create someone like Solid Snake. It's the idea of if you put someone through the same rough experiences, like the same beats as a hero, can you create another hero? Please understand, at this point, the first time I played this, I was 11. So I had no idea what any of this was. I had no idea what any of this meant. And straight up at this point, this just terrified me. And then there's a huge AI speech about what they are actually trying to achieve. It's one that you might have seen floating around the internet.
To begin with, we're not what you'd call human.
But it's eerie in a way that the more that I've replayed the game as I've gotten older, the more that I see parts of what that speech is trying to convey play out in real time on the internet.
But in the current digitized world, trivial information is accumulating every second, preserved in all its triteness, never fading, always accessible.
Rumors about petty issues, misinterpretations, slander.
All this junk data, preserved in an unfiltered state, growing at an alarming rate.
The AI talks about how it's trying to control context, which is something that we face a lot nowadays. It's the idea that if you control the context of a situation and you frame it in a way where one side looks better than another side, but it's not true, but everybody repeats it, does that make it true?
You're being silly. What we propose to do is not to control content, but to create context.
The digital society furthers human flaws and selectively rewards development of convenient half-truths.
And it's the idea that there's too much junk data for any person to objectively ever know what is true. If you look at the political landscape today, that is completely a massive thing. One thing that's really scary about this is the idea that everyone will retreat into their own smaller communities in order to fester their own ideas and make up their own what is essentially truth.
The untested truths, spun by different interests, continue to churn and accumulate in the sandbox of political correctness and value systems.
Everyone withdraws into their own small gated community, afraid of a larger forum. They stay inside their little ponds, leaking whatever truth suits them into the growing cesspool of society at large.
And so, if you can control the context of a situation, you can then manipulate how things are interpreted, which in turn, you can start viewing every issue within two completely different contexts, depending on what side you're in, which is what's happening right now in our political space.
The different cardinal truths neither clash nor mesh. No one is invalidated, but nobody is right.
Not even natural selection can take place here. The world is being engulfed in truth.
And this is the way the world ends. Not with a bang, but a whimper.
We are living everything that this talked about. Because back when this game came out, internet communities were still pretty like anonymous and holistic. There was a hive mind there that was generally the same. It wasn't until internet got really mainstream where people started bringing in like identities in different contexts and like different beliefs of the same situation and different ways to look at a scenario with their own agendas to then split everybody into 2 or 3 or 8 or whatever you have it now. But you see it play out. And I think having this game instill that message in me this early on in my life kind of really made it easy for me to be a much more skeptical person.
Who else could wade through the sea of garbage you people produce, retrieve valuable truths, and even interpret their meaning for later generations?
That's what it means to create context.
I'll decide for myself what to believe and what to pass on.
But is that even your own idea?
Or something Snake told you.
To really question everything that I see, to really look at any scenario that I'm presented and try to figure out how much of that is real, how much of that doesn't feel real. Is there another side for me to look at? Can I figure out where the middle ground is between these two? Can I compare them? Can I look at any situation and figure out if there's one side, is there another side? Are there different beliefs? Do people think differently about this? It's something that I think about a lot nowadays. And it's something that worries me because I'm almost afraid to say that I do that. We live in such a time where people don't really value that on a majority. It seems like a lot of people are bought into the idea that you are with us or against us. So then it gets in this weird space where you start believing in things that aren't true because they support your side of the argument. And I've never really liked that. And I don't know what to do about that besides making a video about how this game influenced me in that way. Well, when I look at the world of information today, given any scenario, especially how crazy this year has been already, I can't confidently say I actually know what is true. And it seems like no matter what I do, everyone's trying to get me under their side by spinning the context in a different way, by spinning intention in a different way to get me onto their respective side. And that's something that I don't like. Because the truth is, a lot of times when I'm looking at any scenario playing out in modern day society, I often conclude that I don't know. I never have enough information to know what's actually going on. And the best that I could do is try to find as much information, find as much detail and context, and relate to anything that I can see about it and come to my own conclusion. And understand that even that conclusion might be misinformed. And that is a fucking horrifying thing. But what a crazy idea to put in an 11-year-old's head, because I think it really helped. And for what it's worth, I always like to assume that most people mean well. So I try to give everybody the benefit of the doubt that the things that we see on the internet are actually just the loud extremes of people. And most normal people sitting in the middle are open to have a conversation with nuance, gathering ideas, coming to meet in the middle, and talking it out. Because if we don't do that, man, we are fucked with just how easily we can be manipulated. And that's kind of what I'll leave you with. Watch where you're being manipulated. If you have a strong argument for something, I question you to just look at the other side to see if you can really support and solidify your idea. Otherwise, you're falling victim to being controlled and manipulated. And that's why Metal Gear Solid 2 is my favorite game of all time. That's all I have today. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe and like the video. It really helps, especially as a small-time creator trying to get to 1,000 subscribers as soon as possible. Any help would be appreciated. Otherwise, thank you so much. I'll see you again soon. Peace.